When you say that gender is a social construct, what does that even mean?
Gender is a social construct thing. I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah, do y'all have I can't answer
like,
that.
I legit really want to know. Could somebody explain it to me?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, I can. I'd like to welcome you to Logical Dynamite Radio, where we make sense out of the nonsense. So today we have a discussion that came from the Daily Wrap-Up Cruise channel. The link to their channel will be in the description. So let's take a listen to what took place.
Could somebody explain it to me?
Sure.
Like, I don't know what it means.
What they say in society. That's why I think when they say cisgender, they say that it's the birth that you are identify as what they assign you at birth, like the doctors or whatever, they assigned you a certain birth based on, I guess, what they see.
No,
so,
when they say it's a social construct, when I think social construct, I think that it's nothing written in stone. It's just what it's perceived to be. Like, it's not a real thing. It just is. That's what I think of when you say social construct. And when you say gender is a social construct, how?
Now, this is an interesting discussion. And I have to say this now, just because I'm able to explain it does not mean that these are my personal beliefs, because anyone who endeavors to engage in any manner of substantive discussion where points of views collide and disagreements occur, before formulating your rebuttal, you would do well to not only understand the argument of the opposition, but also be able to argue their point of view better than they can. That is, before you ultimately destroy the same argument with facts and logic. So now the stance is that gender is a social construct, which begs the question, is this true or false? Now the short answer to this question is yes, it is true, but with a giant but to follow. So let's begin by consulting with the Oxford Dictionary to gain a foundation for how gender is defined. So according to Oxford Dictionary, gender is defined as the male sex or the female sex, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones, or one of a range of other identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. So that's gender. Now, what is a social construct? Well, let's go to Merriam-Webster. So Merriam-Webster defines a social construct as an idea that has been created and accepted by the people in a society. So let's give some examples of social constructs. A social construct can be something like never ask a lady her age, or men should always pay on the first date, mother is always right, father knows best, happy wife, happy life, men are obligated to protect women, every woman. Then there's fat shaming, cancel culture, participation trophies, and the list goes on. Those are social constructs. Now, when it comes to gender as a social construct, what are some examples of that? Well, let's begin first by naming some of the most reoccurring gender pronouns and gender identities. So that would be he, him, his, she, her, hers, right? And examples of social constructs where gender is allocated toward a specific thing, for example, would be Proverbs 1:20, which says, "Wisdom cries out in the streets. She raises her voice in the public squares. So here you can see wisdom is identified as a she. But does wisdom have a double D rack and a lace front with high heels? No. Wisdom yet was referred to as she. So another example would be, let's say there's a guy, he has a sports car. He named his sports car Lucille. And other guys are checking his car out and they're saying, oh man, wow, she's a beauty. See? But despite labeling the car as a she in She's a Beauty, that oil leak does not equate to a menstrual cycle. Yet, the car is referred to as a she. So, that is the social construct of particular gender, language, grammatical constructs. Now, we also have the masculine and the feminine. Now, we've touched on that subject in earlier broadcasts, and if you haven't checked it out, be sure to subscribe and check out those videos after we've cooked this subject matter to a crisp. But let's get back to the lecture at hand. Now, masculine and feminine are also technically social constructs, right? Because pertaining to men and women, in a given society, masculine is defined as the character, the duty, and behavioral traits that are expected of or mostly found exhibited from men. And the feminine is defined as the character, duty, mannerisms, and behavioral traits expected of or mostly found among women. Now, the masculine and feminine is then extrapolated out to principles, objects, and even based on how a given society draws the comparison of the matter to men and women, it categorizes them accordingly. So it'll look at some of the traits of men, and then it will liken a principle according to certain expected societal traits of men. So war is considered masculine. Chaos is considered feminine. Nurturing is feminine, and so on. Right? Now, Earth is considered feminine. Hence, Mother Earth. And the trees, flowers, and sustenance, and the vegetables and the fruits and all of that spring from the earth caused mankind to liken planet Earth to a mother giving birth and nurturing her children. Right? So it was equated to the feminine. But another society can easily draw earthly comparisons to what is commonly found among the men in a given society. And they can choose to identify Earth as masculine and call Earth, instead of Mother Earth, they'll call Earth the third baby daddy from the sun. So, the masculine and the feminine are interchangeable based off of the perception of any given society. Now, in reference to he, him, his, and she, her, hers, those identifying pronouns with the masculine and the feminine, he, him, his are considered the masculine, and she, her, hers are considered the feminine. And this is typically a universal understanding that causes one to assume that the feminine masculine aspect and the sex are exclusive respectively. So typically when you say he, the universal understanding is that you are speaking or referring to a specific sex of an individual, namely male. She, her, hers is feminine, but the universal societal understanding is that you are dealing or addressing a specific sex, namely the female, right? But the social construct argument suggests that the address that is attributed to the masculine or the feminine is interchangeable and basically depending upon the choice of the individual. Despite the overwhelming consensus in a given society that structures its grammar to identify sex by using the masculine feminine aspect, the social construct says any can be either at any given point in time. So a man can be a she because she is feminine, and feminine is a social construct. And a woman can be a he because he is masculine, and masculine is a social construct. And therefore, if it is a social construct by majority consensus, then they feel that they reserve the right individually to determine what is masculine and feminine for themselves. And therefore he, him, his can be feminine, and she, her, hers can be masculine. Because if you can exercise autonomy and create grammatical rules out of thin air, then so can I, is what they argue. So, now that we've addressed the definition of gender and basic social constructs, and we've identified the most common gender identifiers in he, him, hers, and he, him, his, and she, her, hers, as well as the social aspects of feminine and masculine, and the basic main thesis for the gender is the social construct argument. Now, let's address the but. Okay, so to do this, let's go back to the Oxford Dictionary definition of gender. Now it says, the male sex or the female sex, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones, or one of a range of other identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. Now, take a look at that definition. Do you notice anything? The definition begins with the male sex or the female sex. It does not begin with, it does not even address masculine, and it does not address feminine, but rather male and female. Now, however, the social construct argument makes its argument in the portion of the definition that comes after the comma. It makes its argument in this section, the section that reads, or one of a range of other identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. So, therefore, it appears that, excluding male and female, gender also is used in a colloquial context that corresponds the way that a thing is perceived in relation to the traits associated with a thing that cannot be changed, right? So sex, male and female, cannot be changed, right? So in other words, the association with the things that cannot be changed. In other words, if a gardener is tending to a bed of flowers, you might hear that gardener say, "I'm about to water the girls," referring to his flowers. Because given the delicate nature of the flowers, the gardener may perceive girls, young girls, as being delicate, and therefore he will equate that, he'll liken that trait to his flowers, right? And despite whether or not the flowers are male or female, right? Despite whether or not the flower has a stigma or a stamen. The stigma is for the female flower. The stamen is for the male flower. He will call every flower a girl. He will liken it to an aspect of human biology that is used to identify a particular stage of development of a particular sex. Sex which is unchangeable, right? So male and female, which is, it's a biological circumstance in humans that cannot be changed. And if he calls the flowers a girl, what is girl? Girl is the specific English word used to identify the stage of development of a human female, as boy is used to identify the stage of development of the human male, right? So if girl is used and boy is used to identify the stage of development of that which cannot be changed, it also means that girl cannot be changed if girl is used to identify the stage of development of a particular sex. Because sex can't be changed, right? Male, female cannot be changed, right? And the only way for this to be challenged is they'll have to be able to figure out a way to change male to female and female to male. And we know that they cannot, which suggests that biology is excluded from that which is socially constructed. So if you cannot argue the notion of interchangeability of male to female and vice versa, then what do? You have to go after the language that mankind has established. The language that gives mankind a universal understanding of that which is either male or female. Because language is used to express the physical, right? So, if society has a word that is modified depending on the sex of a human individual that is being referred to, such as steward and stewardess, comedian, comedian, right? The male and female. If there's a word that is modified depending on the sex of the human individual that is being referred to, the argument of social construction exists in the gray area. The gray area that uses the interchangeable colloquial gender associations in words. They use the interchangeable colloquial gender associations to conflate or discredit or dismiss the biological gender associations of particular words used to identify the sex, right? So if a flower with a stigma is scientifically labeled as female, and a flower with a stamen is scientifically labeled as male, but yet the gardener, it's okay for the gardener to refer to each of them collectively as girls. Well, then that means that males can be girls. And if girl is the biological state of a particular female and the male flower can be a girl, then that means that it can also be a woman. A male can be a woman, which is severely flawed logic. But that's the argument of gender being socially constructed in a nutshell. It's when the colloquial societal grammatical practices are conflated with the biological societal grammatical practices. And this is why the root of the argument is centered around speech and not biology. Because if biology cannot be 100% altered to legitimize the usage of a label, right? If you can't alter biology to legitimize the usage of a label, meaning if woman is used to identify the female, then how can you use woman to identify that which is male? Well, what you do next is you have to argue the validity of the label so that society's perception of the label will also be perceived of you without question. So if only females are called women, argue against societal usage of woman. Therefore, so that whatever is perceived of a woman will also be perceived of you if you choose to use it without question, contestation, or requirement for modifying adjectives such as trans. And this ideology gave birth to the assertion made by some that trans women are women. But they don't make the argument that trans women are female. But if a given society has a word that is used to identify an adult female, then challenge the word being used and argue your right to use it by conflating the arguments of the colloquial grammatical associations to that which is not human, like girls for flowers and she for car and she for wisdom. You argue the grammatical associations to that which is not human to the biological grammatical associations to that which is human. It's a mixing of the arguments and existing in the gray area. All right? That basically is the idea of gender being a social construct. Now, I know that really trying to break this down, sometimes you could lose a couple of brain cells really trying to explain it, but even with things you disagree with, you have to truly be able to understand it fully. And that way, you can dismantle it upon request. So I hope that this explanation cleared things up for those of y'all at the Daily Wrap-Up crew, or anyone else who finds it hard to dismantle the doctrine of the Eldridge and certain assertions that lack logic and live in the shadows of the gray area. But leave your opinions, subscribe, share, comment, and remember, logic is your ally, and common sense ain't always common. Leave your questions, and I'll check some out and see whether or not, give me some tough ones so I can break them down and dismantle them. Till next time, Logical Dynamite Radio, out.